Today we are talking about Endgame Virtuoso Anatoly Karpov by Tibor Károlyi. And the first thing I want to say is that going over Karpov's endgames is a beautiful thing in and of itself. And I have fond memories back at the GM house. It was me and U.S. Women's Champion GM Irina Krush. We looked at a lot of endings from this book called My 300 Best Games by Karpov. Very light on annotations, essentially unannotated. A beautiful thing to do. And for me personally, just now, this was a great book because I read most of it prior to playing the U.S. Senior, where I'm playing all these legends. And at that tournament, there were no draw offers allowed. And so many of these Karpov games have just an incredible tension throughout them where you can feel just how hard it would be at hours, and then hours 4 and 5. So it's a kind of a mental preparation for that kind of struggle. Okay. So next I want to say what I would hope to get from a book like this. Okay. One of the things I'd hope to get is a lot of discussion about the transition to the endgame. I feel, especially at the highest levels, you look at Fischer, for example, the transition to the endgame is half of the art. It's a huge part of it. And that comes with identifying why Karpov thought some positions would be dangerous, for example, for his opponent. I'll say a little bit more about that in an example. I'd also want a discussion of the chess values of Karpov, or the player that we're talking about, and I'll say a little bit more about that in the example too. And thirdly, I would want a lot of words describing specific situations about what the dynamic is. What is like the take home from this position? Maybe I'll just show one example that kind of deals with that as well. And the book, I think, let's call it the namesake for this book, is Vasily Smyslov, Endgame Virtuoso, in which I feel all of those things are present. And that book is much shorter, very few long variations, but very quality words describing the dynamics of positions. And my personal copy is just tattered. I've read it so many times. It's actually my second copy. So games and snippets of games where we're getting an understanding of what the dynamic of an endgame is. And I think that's crucial to endgame play. We do a lot of, say, sparring, positional endgame sparring positions in the dojo. It's not just about learning endgame algorithms, for example. Okay, so let's then look at now an example. So this is an amazing position from Karpov, Ljubojevic, Linares, 1981. And in this book, we don't even get any discussion of this kind of position. He first starts talking about what's going on here. But to my mind, this is the beginning of the endgame with the decision that Karpov now makes. So he decides to take here, and this is very anti-intuitive to me, because on the surface, what it now looks like to me is my superficial chess values at work here, is that it seems to me that white has the better minor and that they have a clamp on the king side, which can become very dangerous, especially if white can somehow generate a passed pawn over there. So this is already a fantastically interesting decision, and Karpov now plays knight d5. And white now plays c4. Maybe we can argue about it, but that makes a lot of sense because it doesn't seem like we know what the knight is doing there on e7. And here we can already see, like, oh, maybe this is what Karpov had in mind. And the interesting thing about this position is all of a sudden we say, oh, the bishop is blocked on the queen side, blocked by its own pawns on the king side. So maybe it's not that bad for black. Now, something I want to stress is What the book's kind of terrible with is there's a lot of computery analysis to it. But I want a discussion of like, oh, what did Karpov, how did he, think about this position and realize, oh, maybe white has some conceivable grief here. If you turn on the computer, it's not going to say that black is winning. It's probably going to say white is still better. And one of the interesting things about this chess values is this Endgame book is littered with examples where he prefers the knight over the bishop, right? And it's interesting because you look back in kind of the chess lineage, and we have Fischer being the first one to really understand the power of the bishop, then Kasparov, and of course now the computer. The computer loves the bishop, right? It's obsessed with the bishop. So we get all these interesting games in here where then the chess value that's being expressed is all this stuff you guys are talking about with the bishop, that's all wrong. Okay, so let's just go. You can see we're getting to an endgame rather quickly. And it's only here that the book starts talking about what's going on in the endgame, but here we've already actually, the transition to the endgame has already happened. And we get this fantastic move where, again, I'm kind of shocked because normally we would say, oh, black, there's weaker on the king's side. So what are they doing over there? Why are they opening the position for the bishop? These are all of the superficial judgments that I would want to have talked about when we do this position. And this is just stunning here. All of a sudden, black is in charge. Okay. Another thing that I want to stress in terms of chess values that's very interesting about Karpov is that the guy is not so interested in what we could call like objective truth. He's not interested in your super long variations. So I get it, you're writing a book about somebody and you want to show the truth and you want to get in there with the computer. And so this book is littered with just like pages and pages of computer analysis. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. And that's especially inappropriate, I think, for Karpov, because Karpov, I feel, is about ideas and intuition, and he doesn't believe in super long variations in terms of improving your practical play. Okay, I think it's a huge distinction to understand about the guy if you want to appreciate his games. He doesn't believe in your long variations, right? That doesn't mean you don't have to, but if you want to appreciate how Karpov's playing this kind of game, then that's something you need to appreciate. Another thing that kind of goes along with that is he's famously a minimalist. And one of the things about a minimalist is you don't win games by knockout punches. You win games by holding the tension forever. Holding the tension forever, and then maybe winning in the end game. Kind of like this. This is an incredible game. There's many great end games in this book, but this one is a true masterpiece. That one of the reasons it's a masterpiece is it really turns one on to a surprising dynamic in the game that I wouldn't have anticipated, right? Like I have to reverse what my appreciation of the position was. That really is one of the nice things about a masterpiece, right? And I'm sure Ljubojevic as well was just like, dude, I thought I was better at some point, and all of a sudden I'm worse. What happened? Okay. So, unfortunately, this book, there's like loads of computer analysis in all these positions, and it's very unfortunate. But I want to stress the process of going through the games, the annotated games. Whether they're unannotated or not, just the Karpov games, great. And like I said, I think it's a benefit to look at the games even just in an unannotated form. And unfortunately for Karpov, like his annotations, they're soft, man. He's not into it. But that's just part of who he is. He did not believe in this super long search for truth that, this book unfortunately does with his games. So there it is. Endgame Virtuoso Anatoly Karpov.